Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and allow your breath to slow. Tonight we walk downward, into the quiet places, where shadows are not enemies, but memory and home. There was a time before the underworld had a queen. A time when death was not a kingdom, but simply a falling away, a silence without form. In those days, the world was young, and the gods walked among rivers of gold and forests whose leaves glittered like sunlight on water. Among them was Ereshkigal, radiant and laughing, sister to Inanna, the morning star, the goddess of love and all that blooms beneath the sun. They were born from the same breath of creation, twin flames, one light that had split to learn itself. Together they danced in the high places, their laughter the wind, their footsteps the rhythm of the world's first heartbeat. But the heavens are not the whole of existence. Beneath the living earth and the turning sky, beneath root and bone, there was another realm, vast, hollow, waiting, a place where all things went. When they were no longer held by life, it had no ruler, no name, no warmth, no sound, only unshaped silence. The gods above felt the tug of that emptiness, but ignored it. For to look into the dark was to acknowledge an ending, and endings frightened even the divine. But Ereshkigal was not like the others. She listened. She heard the deep place calling, a whisper beneath existence, soft as breath beneath a door. It was not a command. It was not a curse. It was an invitation. One night, while the stars were bright enough to be mistaken for embers scattered across black velvet sky, Ereshkigal followed the whisper. She walked beyond the borders of daylight, where fields become stone, and stone becomes silence. She descended, down past the caverns where no birds sing, down past bones of giants left from the world before this one, down past the last remembered warmth of the sun. She walked until there was no more down left, and there the world opened. The underworld waited for her, like a room that had never before been entered, yet somehow remembered. The air was still, but full, as though every unspoken prayer, every unfinished thought, every quiet grief had gathered here. Ereshkigal stepped inside, and the realm knew her, not as a visitor, not as a trespasser, but as something it had been missing. The darkness did not swallow her light. It held it, gently, reverently, like cupping a flame in joined hands. And Ereshkigal understood. The world did not only need birth, joy, love, and radiance. It needed rest. It needed a place for what was finished, a sanctuary for endings. She did not become queen because she desired power. She became queen because she stayed, because she could bear the silence no other could face. Above, in the lands of sun and river and laughter, Inanna called for her sister, but the call did not reach the deep. The gods said Ereshkigal was lost, but she was not lost. She had learned what no other god wished to know, that darkness is not the opposite of life. It is what makes life whole. Time passed, though time in the underworld was not like time in the lands above. No dawn, no dusk, only the slow exhale of eternity. Souls began to arrive, quiet as feathers falling. Some came trembling, Some came weeping, some came silent, carrying their final moments like broken glass. Ereshkigal welcomed each one. Not with fire, not with judgment, not with crown or throne, but with stillness, with presence, with the kind of love that does not need to be seen to be known. And the dead found rest. Yet out of all the realms, out of all the gods, only one did not understand. Inanna, the bright one, the goddess of desire, of longing, of hunger for more, could not bear that her sister had gone where she could not follow. But she would try, and the world would tremble. Welcome to sleep with myth. Close your eyes. The world above grows quiet now, and we walk deeper. There came a time when the heavens no longer felt whole. Inanna, bright Inanna, goddess of joy, passion, desire, and the living pulse of the world, could not ignore the absence of her sister any longer. Where once her laughter had filled the sky, now a quiet ache followed her. Where once she felt sunlight warming her golden throne, now shadows lingered in places no shadows should be. And though she was a goddess of light, Inanna was not blind. She knew what was missing. Ereshkigal, her sister, her mirror, her other self. The world above had continued. Rivers still flowed, songs still rose, lovers still clung to each other in morning light. But something beneath all things had shifted. The ground felt thinner. The wind hesitated before moving. Sleep had become deeper, and dreams stranger. It was as though the world was holding its breath. And Inanna, radiant though she was, felt the quiet weight of loss settle upon her heart. She had always been the star that rose, but she had lost the one who shone with her. One evening, as the horizon bloomed with fire and amethyst, Inanna stood atop the highest tower of her sacred city. The sky was vast, painted in colors only gods remembered names for. Yet her gaze did not rise upward toward the stars, fell downward, to the earth, to the soil, to the unseen depths below, where Ereshkigal lived now. "Why did you go?" she whispered. The wind did not answer. The clouds did not shift. The world did not stir. The silence was not empty, but full, weighted, almost listening. It was the first time in her eternal existence that Inanna felt alone, and she could not bear it. She summoned her attendants, divine, shimmering beings woven from dawn's first breath. They came quickly, for none dared delay the morning star. "My sister dwells in the realm below," Inanna said. "I will descend to her." The attendants froze, not in surprise but in fear. The underworld was not a place of return. Once entered, one did not ascend again. Inanna knew this, but love is not ruled by fear. One attendant, the eldest, wise with the quiet patience of stone, bowed low. "If you descend, my lady, you must not wear your crown, nor your jewels, nor carry your weapons. For no god may enter the realm below bearing symbols of power." Inanna listened, not because she was commanded, but because she understood that love sometimes requires surrender. So she removed her crown, the one forged from the first sunrise. She set aside her staff carved from the axis of the heavens. She removed her breastplate, etched with victories older than memory. Each piece shimmered as it was released, as though reluctant to leave her. But Inanna stood tall, unadorned, unguarded. The attendants trembled, for now she looked only like a woman, not a goddess. Radiant, yes, but vulnerable. "Tell the world I will return," she said. Her voice did not waver, but the sky dimmed ever so slightly. The entrance to the underworld was not a cave nor a chasm nor a temple. It was a threshold, place where silence collects. She walked downward, following a path no mortal could see. The air cooled, the colors faded. Light thinned like the last exhale of dusk. Eventually, she came upon the first gate that a guardian stood there. Tall as a tower, cloaked in the heavy stillness of endings. Its eyes did not recognize gods or mortals, only truth. "Who comes?" the guardian asked, voice slow as stone shifting. "Inanna," she said, "sister of Ereshkigal. I seek her." The guardian regarded her, not with curiosity, but with inevitability. "To enter, you must give something of yourself." Inanna nodded. She removed her veil, the one that held her beauty like a secret whispered to the moon, and placed it in the guardian's hands. The gate opened, but the path beyond was darker. At the second gate, she surrendered her earrings. At the third gate, she surrendered her necklace. At the fourth gate, she surrendered her bracelets of gold. At the fifth gate, she surrendered her belt of woven starlight. At the sixth gate, she surrendered her sandals, made from the horizon's first morning. At the seventh and final gate, she surrendered her final garment, the last symbol of her divinity. She stood there then, bare, unarmed, unadorned, only herself. No throne, no worship, no legend, just Inanna, just a sister. The realm beyond the final gate was vast, but not empty. It was full of memory. The air was thick with stories that had ended. The silence hummed, not hollow, but deep, like a heartbeat slowed to rest. Souls moved gently, not wandering nor lost, but simply being, resting where rest was deserved. And at the center of it all, Ereshkigal, she sat upon a throne not of cruelty, but of quiet. Her hair was night, her eyes were the soft darkness of sleep. Her presence was the final exhale of a long journey. Inanna stepped forward. She did not speak her name. She did not command. She did not plead. She simply said, "Sister." Ereshkigal looked up, and the underworld shivered, not from power, but from recognition, because love does not end, even when separated by death and light and shadow and silence. The two who had been born as one flame had finally met again, but reunion in the realm of endings is not gentle, not yet, not here, not without cost. The underworld was not silent. It only seemed silent to those who did not know how to listen. Beneath stillness there were echoes, memories breathing, footsteps that had once walked the earth, heartbeats that had not been forgotten, only quieted. Ereshkigal heard all of them, always. Her throne was not a seat of dominion, but of witness. She carried every grief ever left unfinished, every goodbye that had caught in a trembling throat. every love that had nowhere left to go. And now, Inanna stood before her, the morning star, the one who had always risen, the one who had always been light. The underworld held its breath, not because Inanna was unwelcome, but because the realm had never before seen something descend willingly. Inanna looked at her sister, truly looked, and understood what gods above had refused to see. Ereshkigal was not trapped in the underworld. She was keeping it whole. She had taken on the weight no one else could bear, the love that had nowhere left to return, the songs that had ended mid-verse, the hopes that could not be carried any further. There had to be someone to hold the end of all things, and it had been her, alone. Inanna stepped closer, her bare feet silent against the stone. Ereshkigal did not rise from her throne. She did not move at all. But her voice, when it came, was not what Inanna remembered. It was not the laugh that danced like rivers in spring. It was not the warm whisper shared under starlit skies. It was low, soft, hollowed by eternity. "Why have you come here?" Inanna's breath trembled, not from fear, but from remembering the part of herself she had left behind. "To bring you home," she said. The underworld rippled, not with sound, with feeling. Ereshkigal closed her eyes. "Home," she repeated. It was not a question. It was a wound. "There is no home for me above," she said. "My place is here. I stay because I must." Inanna shook her head, tears gathering like dew. "No, you stay because no one asked if you wanted to." Ereshkigal's hands tightened on the arms of her throne. The dead stirred, a whisper like leaves in wind that did not exist. Inanna continued, "You should not have been alone." The words fell like stones into deep water. The underworld itself seemed to listen. Ereshkigal opened her eyes, dark, endless, ancient, and something inside them broke, something fragile, something unbearably human. "You left," she whispered. Her voice cracked, the sound of a mountain giving way. The words hit harder than any divine curse. Inanna's knees weakened. "No," she breathed. "I didn't know. I didn't understand. I didn't see. You didn't look." There it was. Not rage, not blame, just truth. The truth of abandonment. The truth of grief carried too long. Ereshkigal had not chosen the underworld. She had been given to it. The realm had whispered. The gods had let her go. And no one had come after her. Until now. The first tear fell from Ereshkigal's eye. It was not like mortal tears. It was not salt and water. It fell heavy, like a pearl made of memory. When it touched the floor of the underworld, the entire realm shuddered. The soul stirred. The river of silence trembled. Shadows gathered around her throne like grieving hands. Inanna reached out, not to fix, not to take, not to pull her away, but to hold. Their foreheads touched point two halves of one flame, separated by the weight of worlds. Ereshkigal's voice broke open, raw and small. "I was so lonely." Inanna's tears fell to join hers. "I know," she whispered, "and I am here now." The underworld softened, not brighter, but warmer, not louder, but gentler. Grief, when shared, does not vanish, but it becomes bearable. Yet something else stirred in the deep, because love, even divine love, always invites consequence. The underworld had accepted Inanna, but the world above would not allow two queens to hold one throne. And the realm had rules. One descends, one remains. The question was no longer, why did Ereshkigal stay? The question was now, who would stay this time? And the world held its breath. Above the underworld, in the lands of sunlight and wind, the world continued, but not as it had before. The absence of Inanna was not loud. It did not come as storms or earthquakes or fire. Came quietly, like a hush falling over a crowded room, like a held breath that does not release. The first to notice were the priests who tended her temples. They woke one morning and found that the sacred fires, the ones that burned without fuel, the ones that were said to be sparked from Inanna's laughter, had dimmed to embers. No one had touched them. No wind had passed through. But fire knows when a star has descended. And it mourns. ### the songs faded. In the great cities where hymns to Inanna had once shaken the rafters of temples made from white stone, song fell silent. Voices faltered. Melodies broke. It was not sadness, not at first. It was forgetting. Priestesses opened their mouths to sing the sacred verses of dawn, but the words would not form. The notes slipped away before they could be remembered. Children who once danced at morning festivals stared quietly at the horizon, as if waiting for something they could not name. Mothers looked at their infants and felt a loneliness they could not describe. Lovers held each other, but their embraces felt too short. Lovers held each other, but their embraces felt too short. Something in the world had shifted, like a river whose course had changed beneath the surface. Long before the water noticed, the wind stilled, trees stopped swaying. Even when storms rose on distant seas, the branches in the sacred groves remained still, as though listening for her. But the wind that once carried Inanna's joy now drifted like a sigh that had forgotten its purpose. Fields of grain stood tall and golden, yet the harvest did not come, not from failure, but because the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting. ## love grew quiet, not absent, not gone, just quiet. The passion that once burned hot and brilliant, the flame of longing, the spark that urged mortals to reach for one another, became a softer thing, a distant memory of warmth. The world was not dying. It was being dimmed, little by little, as though the sky had been layered with thin veils of silk, each one just barely muting the sun. ## the gods took notice. In the celestial court where the gods gathered, the absence of Inanna was felt like a missing star. Her throne, carved from the first dawn, sat empty. The gods did not speak of it, not openly, but their gazes lingered on the empty seat, and the air around it dimmed just slightly, like grief refusing to be acknowledged. A god of harvest spoke first. Something is wrong in the fields. A god of oceans followed. The tides have begun to hesitate. A god of war lowered his sword. My soldiers no longer hunger for victory. None spoke the name they feared, but the sky itself answered. A faint echo, a whisper without direction, carried by no wind at all. Inanna has descended, and the court trembled, for there were ancient laws older than worship, older than memory, older even than the gods themselves. He who descends does not return, unless another remains in their place. ### The Underworld too shifted. Inanna and Ereshkigal did not speak as mortals speak. They did not embrace as mortals embrace. Their reunion was a presence, a remembering, a flame touched to its reflection. But even flame must decide how to burn. Inanna stood beside her sister's throne, not as a queen, but simply as a woman who had come too late to mend a wound too old. Ereshkigal did not turn her head. She did not need to. She felt Inanna beside her the way one feels the warmth of a hand without touching it. "You cannot stay," Ereshkigal said. Her voice was steady again, the voice of the queen the realm required. Inanna looked at her, not with denial, not with defiance, but with grief. "I know." Her voice was small, and that was the tragedy of it. She had descended to be with her sister, but descent was not reunion. It was exchange. One stays, one leaves, and the underworld does not forget the rules. The realm stirred not violently, but with certainty. The souls who rested there, the river that held every memory unspoken, the silence that had shaped itself around Ereshkigal, all seemed to ask the same question: who will remain? Ereshkigal finally looked at her. Her eyes were not cold. They were tired, ancient, full. "I did not ask for this throne," she said, "but I have carried it." Inanna's tears shimmered in the soft darkness. "I know." Ereshkigal's gaze softened, just enough to reveal the wound beneath the crown. "Would you carry it?" she asked. The question broke the world. Not loudly, quietly, like a heart cracking, like a final breath, like the sound grief makes when it is finally spoken aloud. Inanna closed her eyes, and the world above darkened, just slightly more. There are choices in the world of the living that change the course of a single life. And there are choices in the realm of gods that change the shape of existence itself. This was the second kind. The underworld was quiet, but not still. The souls watched, not with eyes, but with presence, as though sensing a shift in the gravity of eternity. Even the river of forgetting slowed its eternal current, listening. Ereshkigal sat upon her throne, carved not from stone, but from stillness itself. Everything in her posture spoke of endurance, of long nights without mourning, of carrying what could not be put down. Inanna stood before her, bare of crown, of jewels, of divinity's armor. She had come as she was born, light wrapped in longing. The two sisters were close enough to touch, yet between them stood all the unspoken years. And the underworld waited for what would be said next. The question still hung in the dark. "Would you carry it?" Ereshkigal had asked. The throne, the silence, the grief of all endings, the weight no light could soften. Inanna did not answer immediately. She did not weep. She did not bow. She did not plead. She simply breathed. A slow, trembling breath, the kind taken before stepping across a threshold that cannot be crossed twice. "I do not want you to carry this alone," she said softly. The words were true, but truth is not always enough. Ereshkigal looked at her. Really looked. Not as a sister, not as a memory, but as a queen who had held eternity in her hands. "You could not bear it," she said, not unkindly, not as mockery, but as recognition. Inanna had always been the goddess of desire, of hungers, of becoming. Her joy came from motion, from bloom, from dawn, from turning of seasons. The underworld does not move. The underworld does not bloom. The underworld is, and a flame cannot live where nothing burns. The silence between them was a third presence. Ereshkigal spoke first. "I did not choose this place. I stayed because if I did not stay, everything that ends would be lost. And endings matter." Inanna closed her eyes, and tears fell quietly. "I know." She sat then, on the steps below her sister's throne, lowering herself slowly, reverently, as though sitting before a sacred altar. Not as a goddess kneeling to a queen, as a sister kneeling to the other half of herself. "You were always the stronger of us," Inanna whispered. Ereshkigal did not smile, but something in her face shifted, fragile as dawn's first light. "No," she said, "strength is simply what remains when there is no other choice." Meanwhile, above, the world of the living could not wait forever. Children woke from sleep with tears on their cheeks, unable to name the dream they had forgotten. Lovers held hands tighter, fearful of a loneliness they had never known before. Rivers slowed. Seedlings hesitated in the soil. Priestesses looked to the sky and found it dimmer. The world was not dying. It was grieving. A god of storms lifted his arms to summon thunder, and lightning did not come. A god of love anointed two hearts to bind them, and the bond felt faint, distant, as if heard underwater. In temples built of white stone, the sacred drums fell silent. The world had begun to tilt. Something had to restore balance. Something had to return, or something had to remain. Back in the deep, Inanna's tears fell onto the floor of the underworld, and like Ereshkigal's tear before them, they did not disappear. They stayed. Two tears. One of grief carried, one of grief realized, rested side by side on ancient stone. Light and dark, sister and sister, memory and forgetting. Ereshkigal looked at them, and something inside her, something that had forgotten how to move, shifted. She moved her hand. Slowly, deliberately, she reached toward Inanna, and Inanna reached back. Their fingers touched, and between them a pulse. Soft, steady, old as creation. The kind of heartbeat that exists before flesh learns its rhythm. Not the warmth of the sun, not the stillness of the dark. Something shared. Something that had existed before they were gods. Before they were names. Before there was world or sky or death or birth. Sisterhood. Then the underworld spoke. Not with sound. With law. One descends. One remains. The realm was not cruel. It was simply inevitable. The silence pressed around them, not demanding, only reminding. To restore balance, one must stay. To restore the world above, one must leave. And the choice now was no longer between grief and love. It was between who could bear the dark and who could return to light with the memory of it. Inanna lifted her gaze to her sister. She understood. They both did. No anger, no pleading, no tragedy born of force. Just recognition, just love, just the quiet acceptance of a truth too large for words. They could not be together. Not here, not now, not in this form. But neither would they be lost to each other again. Not this time. Their story was not ending. It was changing. The choice was made. And the underworld exhaled. There was a moment in the underworld, a moment that did not belong to time itself. The world above still rushed, still burned, still wept, still bloomed. But below, in the kingdom beneath all endings, the quiet had changed. Ereshkigal sat upon her throne of darkened stone, but the throne no longer felt like a prison, felt like a pulse, a heartbeat, a living thing, for she had learned something that even gods are slow to understand. Grief is not an absence of love. Grief is love, carried into the places where sound cannot go. And now, her underworld was full of love. Not loud love, not bright love, but the kind of love found in the closing of eyes before sleep, in the hand held during a final breath, in the whisper spoken to the one who will not wake. She did not rule over death. She held the world's tenderness. Souls came, some afraid, some furious, some weary beyond measure, some clinging to life like a sailor clings to the last scrap of wood of a shattered ship. Ereshkigal listened to every one, not with words, but with presence. And as she listened, the river that had once echoed with endless sorrow began to sing, quiet song, a song of return, of release, not forgetting, but remembering without pain. The souls that entered her realm no longer came to be lost. They came to be held. She did not free them from death. She simply ensured they did not face it alone. Above, the gods of heaven spoke her name again, not as a warning, not as a curse, but as a prayer. Even the sun, in her radiant throne of dawnlight, bowed her head, for she understood now. Light is not the opposite of darkness. Darkness is where light goes to rest. And in this stillness, in this quiet kingdom, under roots older than stars, and stone older than memory, Ereshkigal closed her eyes, not in despair, but in peace, for she knew what all mortals one day learn. Death is not the closing of a book. It is the closing of the world's eyes, so that it may dream again. The underworld breathed. The quiet was soft, warm, holy, and in the deepest part of that silence, deeper than sorrow, deeper than memory, deeper than endings, a single star flickered, not above, not far away, but here, inside the darkness. The star did not shine to be seen. It shined to remind, where there is shadow, there is something worth protecting. Where there is grief, there has been love. Where there is an ending, There waits a beginning. Ereshkigal placed her hand upon the throne, not to claim it, to comfort it. Her kingdom did not belong to emptiness. It belonged to every heartbeat that had ever slowed, ever quieted, ever fallen into stillness. Her realm was a cradle. Her darkness was a blanket. Her silence was a lullaby. And every soul who passed beneath her gaze knew the truth. No one is ever truly alone in the dark. Not anymore. Not while she waits. Not while she watches. Not while she remembers. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.